The crash of shattering glass jolted Nathaniel York from his needle, and thread at midnight, his frail hands trembling as he pressed against the workbench for support. Through the darkness of his tiny tailor shop came the heavy thud of boots on wooden floorboards, followed by a string of muttered curses in a voice too deep and rough to belong to any common thief. His heart hammered against his ribs as he reached for the oil lamp with shaking fingers, lifting it high to illuminate the intruder who had just broken through his front window. The light revealed a young orc woman frozen mid-step among the scattered glass, her emerald skin catching the golden glow of the flame. She stood nearly a head taller than him, broad-shouldered and powerfully built, dressed in torn leather armor that hung loose on her frame as though she had lost weight recently. Small tusks protruded from her lower lip, and her pointed ears twitched as her amber eyes went wide with something between fear and defiance. Blood seeped through a makeshift bandage wrapped around her left thigh, and her right arm hung awkwardly at her side. "Do not scream," she growled, though her voice wavered with exhaustion. "I mean no harm. I just need—" "You are injured," Nathaniel interrupted, his voice coming out softer than he intended. He set the lamp down carefully and straightened his thin frame, trying to ignore the way his weak lungs protested with each rapid breath. "And you are bleeding on my floor." The orc woman blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Her hand instinctively moved to the dagger at her belt, but the gesture seemed more defensive than threatening. Up close, Nathaniel could see she was younger than he first thought, perhaps no more than 19 or 20 summers. Exhaustion lined her face, and her breathing came shallow and pained. "I will leave," she said, but made no move toward the broken window. Her legs trembled visibly. "You will collapse before you make it 3 steps into the street," Nathaniel observed, moving slowly toward his supply cabinet. "Then the town guard will find you, and they will not be as accommodating as I am." He pulled out clean cloth bandages and a bottle of distilled alcohol. "How long have you been traveling with those wounds?" 2 days, she admitted, swaying slightly. "Maybe 3. I lost track." Nathaniel turned to face her fully, taking in the state of her clothing and armor. Years of tailoring had trained his eye to assess fabric and fit with precision, and what he saw made his professional sensibilities rebel. "That armor is doing you no favors. The straps are cutting into your shoulders wrong, restricting your movement, and those trousers are soaked through with blood and filth, pressing infection directly into your wound." The orc woman stared at him as though he had spoken in an ancient tongue. "What?" "Strip," Nathaniel ordered, pointing to the changing screen in the corner of his shop. His tone carried the same firm authority he used with difficult customers who insisted they knew their measurements better than his tape measure. "Remove those ruined garments immediately. I cannot properly assess or treat your injuries while you are wearing contaminated clothing." For a moment, the orc woman simply gaped at him, her green cheeks darkening to a deep jade that spread down her neck. You want me to?" "Undress, yes," Nathaniel confirmed, already pulling out his measuring tape and a clean sheet to use as a temporary covering. "I am a tailor, not a physician, but I know infection when I see it brewing. Those wounds need proper cleaning before the fever sets in." He paused, studying her face. "Unless you would prefer I call for the town guard, though I suspect they will be less gentle in their examination." The blush on her cheeks deepened further, but she limped toward the changing screen, moving with the wounded dignity of a cornered animal that still possessed its pride. "I have coin," she muttered. "I can pay for treatment. And for the window." "We will discuss payment later," Nathaniel said, busying himself with preparing a basin of clean water heated over the small brazier he kept for pressing delicate fabrics. "First, we address the immediate problem of you bleeding to death in my shop." Behind the screen came the sounds of leather creaking and fabric rustling, punctuated by sharp hisses of pain. Nathaniel kept his eyes averted, focusing on his preparations with deliberate care. His mother had been a healer before the wasting sickness took her, and though he lacked her skill with herbs and poultices, he remembered the basics she had taught him. Clean the wound, stop the bleeding, watch for signs of infection. "I do not understand you," the orc woman called out, her voice tight with pain and confusion. "Humans hate orcs. Why are you helping me?" "Because you are injured in my shop," Nathaniel replied simply. "And because leaving you to die on moral principles seems rather pointless when I have clean bandages and hot water readily available." He coughed, covering his mouth with one thin hand. His weak constitution had plagued him since childhood, leaving him too fragile for the work his father had wanted from him. Tailoring suited his delicate touch and eye for detail, but it had marked him as strange in a town that valued strength and martial prowess. "You are ill," the orc woman observed. The changing screen shifted as she peeked around the edge, the sheet wrapped around her torso and hips. Without the armor, she looked somehow more vulnerable despite her obvious physical strength. Her skin bore old scars alongside the fresh wounds, telling stories of past battles survived. "I have always been frail," Nathaniel admitted, not bothering to hide the truth. "My lungs are weak. I tire easily. I am not built for heroics or grand gestures." He gestured to the cushioned chair near his workbench. "Sit. Let me see the leg wound first." She moved slowly, each step careful as she lowered herself into the chair. The sheet fell away from her injured thigh, revealing an ugly gash that had been poorly stitched with rough twine. The skin around it blazed red and hot to the touch, and Nathaniel felt his stomach turn at the sight. "This needs to be cleaned and restitched," he said quietly, meeting her eyes. "It will hurt considerably." The orc woman set her jaw, gripping the arms of the chair until her knuckles paled. "Do what you must." Nathaniel worked with steady hands despite their tendency to shake, his years of precise needlework serving him well as he carefully removed the crude stitches and cleaned the wound with alcohol-soaked cloth. The orc woman bit down hard on the leather strap he offered her, muffling her groans of pain. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but she held perfectly still, exhibiting a discipline that spoke of warrior training. "What is your name?" Nathaniel asked as he threaded a needle with silk thread finer than anything used in battlefield surgery. Conversation would help distract her from the pain of what came next. "Greshka," she managed around the leather strap. "Greshka Ironhide, though I have no clan now. Outcast." She nodded once, sharply. Nathaniel did not press for details. Instead, he began the delicate work of stitching her wound closed with small, even stitches that would heal cleaner than the rough work she had received before. His mother had taught him that even utilitarian stitches deserved care and attention. "My name is Nathaniel," he said softly, working the needle with practiced precision. "Nathaniel York. I inherited this shop from my uncle 3 years ago when he passed. It is not much, but it provides enough for a simple life." "You are kind," Greshka said, her voice rough with pain and something else, wonder, perhaps, or disbelief. "No human has ever treated me with kindness before." Nathaniel tied off the final stitch and reached for fresh bandages. "Then you have known the wrong sort of humans. Hold still while I wrap this." He worked in silence for several minutes, winding the clean cloth around her thigh with careful attention to tension and coverage. The intimate nature of the task was not lost on him, but he maintained professional detachment, focusing on the work itself rather than the warmth of her skin beneath his fingers or the way she watched him with those striking amber eyes. The arm now, he said, sitting back. What happened there? Dislocated shoulder, Greshka admitted. From climbing the cliff face south of town, I thought I could. She trailed off, embarrassment coloring her features again. You thought you could slip into town unnoticed and find help, Nathaniel finished for her. But the main gates are watched and the walls are high, so you took the treacherous path. He stood, moving around behind her. This will hurt worse than the stitches. The shoulder needs to go back into the socket. Greshka's breath quickened, but she nodded. Do it. Nathaniel had seen this done once, years ago when a customer's husband had fallen from a horse. He positioned himself carefully, bracing one hand against her shoulder blade while gripping her arm with the other. On 3. 1. 2. He pulled on 2 instead of 3, using the element of surprise to override her instinct to tense. The shoulder popped back into place with an audible click, and Greshka let out a roar of pain that surely woke half the street. She doubled forward, breathing hard, but after a moment she rolled the shoulder experimentally. Better, she gasped. By the ancestors, that hurt, but it is better. I will fashion a sling to keep it immobilized for a few days, Nathaniel said, already moving to his fabric stores. He selected a length of sturdy cotton and began cutting and folding with quick, efficient movements. You should rest. There is a cot in the back room where I sometimes sleep when I work late on rush orders. Greshka turned to look at him fully, the sheet clutched against her chest. Why are you doing this? I broke into your shop. I am an orc. Your people hate mine. Nathaniel paused in his work, considering her question seriously. Because you needed help and I could provide it. Because judging someone based on the circumstances of their birth seems foolish when I have been judged harshly for my own weaknesses my entire life. He met her eyes steadily. And because I suspect that anyone who takes the time to say they mean no harm before drawing a weapon is not truly a threat. Something shifted in Greshka's expression, a softness entering her gaze that transformed her features from fierce to something far more vulnerable. You are very strange, Nathaniel York. So I have been told, he replied with a slight smile, the first hint of humor entering his voice. Come, before you rest, we need to address your other injuries. I see cuts on your arms and what looks like a burn on your side. The next hour passed in careful ministrations as Nathaniel cleaned and bandaged each wound he found. Greshka remained mostly silent, though occasionally she would answer his gentle questions about how she had received a particular injury. A story emerged gradually of a young orc warrior who had defended a human child from a wild bear, only to be cast out from her clan for showing weakness toward the enemy. The human village had not thanked her, either they had driven her away with stones and threats, unable to see past her green skin and tusks to the heroism of her actions. The child lived, Greshka said softly as Nathaniel secured the final bandage around her ribs. That is what matters. I would make the same choice again. Even knowing the cost, Nathaniel asked, stepping back to examine his work. She looked more comfortable now, no longer gray beneath her green skin from blood loss and pain. Even knowing the cost, she confirmed, but I will not lie, it is hard. I have nowhere to go, no one who will take me in. I thought perhaps in a human town I might find work, but she gestured to herself with bitter irony. No one wants to hire an orc, especially not an outcast. Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment, his mind working through possibilities and consequences. The practical part of him that kept careful accounts and measured risk warned against what he was about to offer. But his heart, that part of him that had always been too soft for this harsh world, spoke louder. Stay here, he said finally. At least until you heal. I have the back room and business has been slow enough that I could use help around the shop. Sweeping, organizing supplies, perhaps even learning some basic mending if you are willing. Greshka stared at him as though he had offered her a kingdom instead of a cramped storage room and menial labor. You would let an orc stay in your shop. The other humans will. The other humans will gossip and clutch their purses when they walk past, Nathaniel interrupted. But they will still come for their tailoring because I am the only decent tailor within 3 days' ride. And you will keep your head down and work hard, and perhaps we both benefit from this arrangement. You trust me. Disbelief colored every word. I trust that you said you would pay for the window, Nathaniel replied pragmatically. And I trust that someone who risks exile to save a child is probably not going to murder me in my sleep for my collection of needles and thread. He coughed again, more violently this time, and had to sit down for a moment to catch his breath. Greshka moved instinctively to help him, her hand hovering near his shoulder before pulling back uncertainly. Your illness is chronic but not immediately fatal, Nathaniel assured her once he could speak again. I manage well enough. Though perhaps having someone here who can carry the heavy bolts of fabric and climb ladders without getting dizzy would be useful. He glanced at her shoulder. Once you heal, of course. A smile tugged at the corners of Greshka's mouth, the first genuine expression of happiness he had seen from her. It softened her features dramatically, making her look her true age rather than the hardened warrior she had appeared at first. You are offering me work. I am offering you room and board in exchange for assistance around the shop, Nathaniel clarified. Plus a small wage once you are well enough to take on actual tasks. We can discuss permanent arrangements if this trial period works out for both of us. I accept, Greshka said immediately, then seemed to catch herself. That is, if you are certain. I do not want to bring trouble to your door. Trouble already came through my window, Nathaniel pointed out dryly, gesturing to the broken pane that still lay scattered across his floor. At this point, the worst has already happened. Now come, let me show you the back room before you fall asleep in that chair. He led her through the narrow doorway behind his workbench into the small storage space that doubled as his occasional sleeping quarters. It was cramped and cluttered with fabric bolts and half-finished projects, but the cot was clean and the blankets warm. Greshka looked at it as though it were a palace bed. Thank you, she said quietly, and the depth of emotion in those 2 words made Nathaniel's chest tighten. Rest, he told her. Tomorrow we will deal with practical matters like clothes that actually fit you and food to restore your strength. Tonight, you are safe. Greshka settled onto the cot with a sigh of relief, her exhausted body finally allowing itself to relax. Within moments, her breathing had deepened into sleep, and Nathaniel found himself watching her for a moment longer than necessary. She looked younger in sleep, vulnerable in a way she would probably hate if she knew he was seeing it. He returned to the main shop and stared at the broken window with resignation. It was too late to repair it tonight, so he settled for sweeping up the glass and boarding over the opening with spare planks. The task took longer than it should have with his limited strength, and by the time he finished, dawn was painting the eastern sky pale gold. Nathaniel made himself tea and settled at his workbench, too restless to sleep despite his own exhaustion. His mind kept returning to the orc woman sleeping in his back room, to the choice he had just made that would undoubtedly complicate his quiet life. He should feel worried, perhaps even frightened. Instead, what he felt was something closer to purpose. The morning brought customers, as he had predicted. Mrs. Pemberton arrived first, her eyes immediately going to the boarded window and then narrowing with suspicion. Trouble last night, Nathaniel. A branch through the window during the storm, he lied smoothly, gesturing to the cloudy sky. I will have it repaired this afternoon. She did not look convinced, but accepted her repaired dress without further comment. The next customer was less tactful old Gerald from the smithy, who complained loudly about orcs spotted near the town borders and how the guard needed to increase patrols. Nathaniel made agreeable noises while pinning Gerald's new vest, all while acutely aware of Greshka presumably listening from the back room. It was nearly noon when she finally emerged, moving stiffly but under her own power. She had managed to dress herself in her cleaned but still damaged clothing, and she looked around the shop with evident discomfort. "I heard them," she said quietly. "The ones talking about orcs." "Perhaps I should. You should sit down and eat something," Nathaniel interrupted, producing the bread and cheese he had set aside from his own breakfast. "And then we are going to address your clothing situation because I refuse to have an assistant walking around in rags. It is bad for business." "Assistant," Greshka repeated, testing the word. A small smile played at her lips. "That is what I said, is it not?" Nathaniel pulled out his measuring tape. "Now stand still. I need your measurements if I am going to make you something proper to wear." The blush returned to Greshka's cheeks with startling speed. "You want to measure me?" "I am a tailor," Nathaniel reminded her patiently. "Measuring people is approximately 70% of what I do. The other 30% is cutting fabric and stitching it together. Now arms out, please." Greshka complied with visible embarrassment, standing rigidly as Nathaniel moved around her with professional efficiency. He called out numbers that she did not understand, making notes in his worn ledger with practiced shorthand. His touch was impersonal but gentle, and gradually she began to relax. "You are quite tall," he observed, measuring from her shoulder to her wrist. "And your shoulders are broader than most. That armor you were wearing was sized for someone else entirely. No wonder you were uncomfortable." "It was my brother's," Greshka admitted. "He fell in battle 2 years ago. I wore it to honor him, but also because we could not afford new armor for me." Nathaniel paused, his expression softening. "Then we will clean it properly and make adjustments so it fits you correctly." Armor should honor the wearer as much as the memory of the fallen. He returned to his measurements, wrapping the tape around her waist. "For now, I will make you sturdy work clothes, trousers and tunics that can withstand heavy use. And a proper dress for when you are not working, because everyone deserves at least one nice outfit." "A dress?" Greshka sounded startled. "I have never worn a dress." "Never?" Nathaniel glanced up at her face, surprised. "Why not?" she shrugged, a gesture made awkward by her sore shoulder. "Orc women are warriors. We train and fight alongside the men. Dresses are impractical for that life." "Perhaps," Nathaniel acknowledged, finishing his measurements and stepping back. "But you are not living that life anymore. Here, you can choose what to wear based on what you like, not what is expected of you." He caught her expression and added, "Of course, if you prefer trousers exclusively, that is also your choice. I simply wanted to offer options." Greshka was quiet for a long moment, her hand unconsciously moving to touch one of her small tusks in what he was beginning to recognize as a nervous gesture. "I think," she said slowly, "I would like to try wearing a dress, just to see what it feels like." The smile that crossed Nathaniel's face was warm and genuine. "Then I will make you something beautiful. But first, practical garments for working. I have some sturdy linen that should serve well." He set to work immediately, his hands moving with sure confidence as he cut and pinned fabric. Greshka watched him with fascination, drawn to the precision of his movements and the way his whole demeanor changed when he was focused on his craft. The fragile, sickly man transformed into someone certain and capable, creating something from nothing with needle and thread. "Can you teach me?" she asked impulsively. "To sew, I mean. I can mend tears in leather and fabric roughly for field repairs, but nothing like what you do." Nathaniel glanced up from his work, pleasure evident in his expression. "I would be happy to teach you. Good help is hard to find, and if you learn proper technique, you could handle the simpler alterations and repairs. That would free me to focus on the more complex commissions." They fell into an easy rhythm over the following hours. Nathaniel worked on Greshka's new clothes while explaining his techniques, and she listened with surprising intensity, asking intelligent questions that showed she understood the principles he was teaching. When customers came, and they did come, drawn by curiosity about the boarded window, Greshka retreated to the back room as they had agreed. Nathaniel could see the strain it put on her, hiding like a criminal, but she bore it without complaint. By evening, he had finished a basic tunic and trousers for her, sturdy garments in dark green that happened to complement her skin tone. Greshka changed behind the screen and emerged looking far more comfortable than she had in her damaged armor. "These fit perfectly," she said with wonder, moving through a series of stretches and basic combat stances. "I can move freely without any binding or rubbing." "How did you—" "30 years of practice," Nathaniel replied, though he was only 28 himself. "Well, 28 years, but who is counting?" He coughed again, the sound wet and painful, and had to sit down suddenly as dizziness washed over him. Greshka was at his side in an instant, her hand steadying his shoulder. "Your illness is worse than you said." "It comes and goes," Nathaniel admitted once he caught his breath. "The dampness makes it worse. I will be fine." But Greshka was already moving, stoking the fire in the brazier higher and fetching a blanket to wrap around his thin shoulders. "You took care of me last night. Let me return the favor now." There was something comforting about her presence, about the careful way she made him tea and insisted he drink it all. Nathaniel found himself relaxing despite his usual reluctance to show weakness. Perhaps it was because Greshka herself had been so vulnerable the night before, or perhaps it was simply that her concern felt genuine rather than pitying. "Tell me about your family," Greshka said as she settled on the floor near his chair, her long legs crossed. "You mentioned your uncle left you this shop. What about your parents?" "My mother died when I was 12, Nathaniel said quietly. "The same wasting sickness that weakens my lungs took her much faster and harder. My father was a soldier. He died in the border wars when I was 15. My uncle took me in and taught me his trade, probably because he recognized I would never survive as a fighter." "I am sorry," Greshka said with simple sincerity. "It is hard to lose parents young. My own mother died in childbirth with my youngest brother. He lived, but she did not." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the evening deepening to night around them. Nathaniel felt the tightness in his chest easing gradually, either from the warmth or the tea or simply from not being alone for once. "What will you do?" he asked eventually. "Long term, I mean." "You cannot hide in my back room forever." Greshka's expression turned thoughtful. "I do not know. I have no plan beyond surviving each day, but if you truly mean to teach me tailoring, perhaps I could make something of that. Learn a trade that does not require me to fight. You do not miss it?" Nathaniel asked, curious. "The warrior's life, parts of it," she admitted, "the clarity of purpose, the brotherhood of the warband, but I do not miss the killing or the fear or the way violence becomes the answer to every problem." She met his eyes. "Is that strange for an orc to feel that way?" "I do not know enough about orcs to say," Nathaniel replied honestly. "But it does not seem strange for a person to grow weary of violence. That seems perfectly natural to me." Greshka smiled, that same soft expression that made her look younger and more hopeful. "You are unlike anyone I have ever met, Nathaniel York." "I could say the same about you, Greshka Ironhide. The days that followed fell into a pattern that surprised them both with its ease. Greshka healed quickly, her orc constitution burning through infections that would have killed a human. Within a week, she was moving freely, helping around the shop with increasing confidence. Nathaniel taught her basic stitching techniques, starting with simple repairs and gradually working up to more complex tasks. She proved to be an excellent student patient, detail-oriented, and possessing surprising dexterity in her strong hands. The first time she completed a hem repair that Nathaniel deemed acceptable for a customer, she beamed with pride that made his heart do something complicated in his chest. The issue of the townspeople remained delicate. Word had spread that Nathaniel had hired help, but he carefully arranged things so that Greshka worked in the back room while he handled customer interactions up front. It was not a perfect solution, but it allowed her to contribute without drawing unwanted attention. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after Greshka's arrival, Mayor Thompson visited the shop with his daughter's wedding dress for final alterations. He was a broad man with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness, and Nathaniel felt unusually nervous as he brought out the elegant gown for inspection. "Fine work as always," Thompson said, running an appraising eye over the detailed lacework. Then his gaze shifted to the doorway where Greshka had been working, just barely visible from his angle. "I hear you have taken on an assistant." Nathaniel's heart jumped into his throat. "I have. Someone to help with the heavy lifting and basic repairs. An orc, they say." Thompson's voice was neutral, giving nothing away. There was no point in lying. "Yes, sir. An orc who needed work and I needed help. It has been a mutually beneficial arrangement." Thompson was quiet for a long moment, and Nathaniel braced himself for demands that he send Greshka away. Instead, the mayor surprised him. "Times are changing. The war ended 2 years ago, but we are all still acting like enemies. Someone has to be first to try something different." He met Nathaniel's eyes directly. "You have never given me reason to doubt your judgment. I trust you know what you are doing." "I do," Nathaniel said firmly, meaning it more than he had expected to. "Then I will hold my tongue when others ask me about it," Thompson said. "But understand that I cannot protect you from all talk. People will say things." "People always say things," Nathaniel replied. "They have said plenty about me over the years for being too weak and strange. I have survived their opinions before." Thompson actually smiled at that. "True enough. Tell your assistant that she does good work on those repairs. My wife brought in 3 dresses last week and they came back better than new." After the mayor left, Nathaniel sagged with relief. Greshka emerged from the back room, her expression cautious. He knows, and he does not object." Nathaniel caught her hands without thinking, squeezing them in his excitement. "Greshka, if Mayor Thompson is willing to overlook your presence, others will follow his lead. This could work, really work." Greshka looked down at their joined hands, her cheeks darkening with that now familiar blush. "You have soft hands," she said quietly. "From your work, mine are so rough and scarred." "Your hands create beauty too now," Nathaniel pointed out, reluctantly releasing her. "They are learning a new kind of strength." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of feelings neither was quite ready to name. Greshka pulled back first, clearing her throat. "I should finish that hem repair you assigned me. The customer needs it by tomorrow." "Right. Yes, of course." Nathaniel busied himself with straightening fabric bolts that did not need straightening, trying to ignore the way his pulse had quickened from such a simple touch. But awareness, once awakened, could not be easily dismissed. Over the following weeks, Nathaniel found himself noticing things about Greshka that had nothing to do with her progress as a tailor. The way she hummed tunelessly while she worked, the furrow that appeared between her brows when she concentrated on a difficult stitch, the surprisingly delicate way she handled the fine fabrics, treating them with reverence despite her warrior's strength. And Greshka, for her part, watched Nathaniel with growing warmth. She noticed how he never complained about his illness even on days when breathing clearly pained him. The way he treated every customer with courtesy regardless of how they spoke to him. His hands moving with grace and certainty over fabric, creating beauty from simple cloth. The dress he had promised her took shape slowly, worked on during quiet evening hours after the shop closed. Nathaniel kept it hidden, wanting it to be a surprise, and Greshka respected his privacy even though curiosity clearly ate at her. "Why are you doing all this for me?" she asked one evening as they shared a simple dinner in the shop's back room. It had become their habit to eat together, companionable meals punctuated by easy conversation and comfortable silences. Nathaniel considered the question seriously. "At first, because you needed help and I could provide it, but now—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Now because you have become important to me, because I like having you here, because the shop feels less lonely with you in it." Greshka's breath caught audibly. "Nathaniel, you do not have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I know the situation is complicated. I just wanted you to know that you are not merely an employee or a charity case. You are—" He trailed off, courage failing. "A friend," Greshka supplied softly. "Yes, a friend." Though even as he said it, Nathaniel knew the word was insufficient for what he felt. But it was safer than the truth. Safer than acknowledging the way his heart lifted every morning when she emerged from the back room, or how her rare smiles had become more precious to him than gold. Summer deepened into early autumn, bringing cooler temperatures and the harvest season. Business picked up as people ordered new clothes for harvest festivals and preparations for winter. Greshka had progressed enough in her skills that Nathaniel allowed her to handle simple alteration appointments, and most customers accepted her presence with wary tolerance if not warmth. There were exceptions, of course. Old Mistress Crane refused to be in the same room as that creature and had to be served with Greshka hidden away. Young Timothy Morgan called her a savage once, and earned a sharp reprimand from Nathaniel that surprised both the boy and Greshka. And once, 3 men from a neighboring village made trouble when they saw Greshka through the shop window, shouting epithets until Mayor Thompson himself came to disperse them. "Does it bother you?" Nathaniel asked that night, after the mayor had left and they had barricaded the door as a precaution. "The way some people treat you," Greshka shrugged, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. "I expected worse, honestly. At least here I am alive and fed and learning something valuable." "That is more than I had before." "You deserve better than mere tolerance," Nathaniel said fiercely. "You deserve respect. And you deserve to breathe without pain and move without weakness," Greshka countered. "But we work with what we are given, do we not? We survive and try to find moments of happiness where we can." Nathaniel reached out and took her hand deliberately this time, not pulling away when she looked at him with surprise. "You are one of those moments of happiness for me. I need you to know that. Nathaniel." His name came out almost as a whisper. "I am an orc. You are human, even if we both felt, even if there was—" She struggled for words, her tusked mouth working soundlessly. "Even if there was something between us beyond friendship," Nathaniel finished quietly. "I know it is complicated. I know society would condemn it, but I have spent my entire life being told I am too weak, too strange, too different. And you have been told you are too savage, too monstrous, too other. Perhaps 2 people who do not fit anywhere else might fit together." Greshka's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "You cannot mean that. I have never been more serious about anything in my life." Nathaniel stood, still holding her hand, and drew her gently to her feet. I am not asking you to declare your feelings or make any commitments. I am simply telling you that mine have grown beyond what I expected. And if yours have too, then perhaps we can explore what that means together. For a moment, Greshka simply stared at him, her amber eyes searching his face for any sign of deception or doubt. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her, because slowly, carefully, she leaned down and pressed her forehead against his, an orc gesture of affection and trust he had learned about from her stories. "My heart has been yours for weeks now," she confessed in a whisper. "I tried to ignore it, to tell myself it was gratitude or loneliness. But every day I wake up wanting to see your face. Every smile you give me feels like treasure. I have fallen for you, Nathaniel York, though I know I should not have." Nathaniel's free hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the proud line of her cheekbone. "There is no should in matters of the heart. There is only what is. And what is that I care for you deeply." "I do not know how to do this," Greshka admitted, vulnerability making her voice shake. Romance was not part of warrior training, and between different species with all the prejudice, and we figure it out together, Nathaniel interrupted gently. "One day at a time. No expectations beyond honesty and care for each other." He smiled slightly. "Besides, I have no idea what I am doing either. I have spent my entire adult life married to my work. You are the first person who has made me want something more." Greshka laughed, the sound watery but genuine. "We are a pair, are we not? The fragile tailor and the exiled warrior, trying to stumble through romance like children." "Sounds like the beginning of a terrible ballad," Nathaniel agreed, making her laugh again. Then, because he was feeling bold and life was too short for cowardice, he rose up on his toes and pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek, just below her pointed ear. Greshka went completely still, her breath stopping. Then, moving with careful deliberation, she turned her head and brought her lips to his in a kiss that was tentative and sweet and over far too quickly. "Was that?" she started. "Perfect," Nathaniel finished. "Absolutely perfect." They stood there in the lamp-lit shop, foreheads pressed together and hands clasped, two unlikely souls who had found each other against all odds. Outside, the night pressed close and the world went on, heedless and harsh. But inside, there was warmth and hope, and the fragile beginning of something neither had dared to dream of. The next morning, Nathaniel presented Greshka with the finished dress he had been working on in secret. It was a simple design but beautifully executed, in a deep forest green that made her skin glow. The bodice was fitted but comfortable, and the skirt fell in graceful folds to her ankles. He had incorporated subtle details that reflected her heritage embroidery along the hem in patterns borrowed from the orc clan symbols she had once drawn for him. Greshka took the dress with shaking hands, her eyes wide. "You made this for me." "I promised you a dress," Nathaniel reminded her. "Go try it on." She disappeared behind the changing screen, and Nathaniel waited with nervous anticipation. When she finally emerged, his breath caught. The dress fit her perfectly, accentuating her strong shoulders and proud bearing while softening her edges. She moved awkwardly, clearly unused to skirts, but there was wonder on her face. "I look." She started, then stopped, staring down at herself. "Beautiful," Nathaniel supplied. "You look beautiful, Greshka." The blush spread across her whole face this time, and she ducked her head. "I have never felt beautiful before. Warriors are fierce, strong, intimidating, not beautiful. You are all of those things and beautiful besides," Nathaniel said firmly. He offered his hand. "Dance with me." "There is no music," Greshka pointed out, but she took his hand anyway. "Then we will make our own." Nathaniel hummed a simple tune his mother had once sung to him, and they swayed together in the quiet shop, graceless but happy. Greshka stumbled over her own feet twice, tangling in the unfamiliar skirt, and Nathaniel had to stop to catch his breath several times. But they laughed through it all, finding joy in their shared imperfection. "I wish the world could see you as I do," Nathaniel said as they paused, still holding each other. "Not as an orc or a warrior or an outcast, but simply as Greshka, as the woman who learned to sew with such dedication, who makes terrible jokes when she thinks I am not listening, who has the kindest heart I have ever known. And I wish the world could see past your illness to the strength inside you," Greshka replied. "The courage it takes to live each day when your own body fights against you. The generosity that made you help a stranger who broke through your window. The talent in your hands that creates such beauty." They kissed again, slower this time, learning the shape of each other. Nathaniel's hand tangled in Greshka's dark hair, while her arms wrapped around him with careful gentleness, mindful of his fragility. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, him from his weak lungs, her from emotion. "I love you," Greshka said suddenly, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I know it is too soon and probably foolish, but I do. I love you, Nathaniel." "I love you too," he replied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "And it is not too soon, because I have loved you since the night you stood in my shop, fierce and bleeding and still trying to be brave. I just did not have a name for it until now." They stood wrapped in each other's arms as morning light filtered through the shop windows, and for that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the prejudice they would face, not the challenges ahead, not the uncertainty of the future. There was only this: two hearts that had found their home in each other, but reality, as it always does, intruded eventually. The sound of approaching footsteps made them pull apart just before someone tried the door. Greshka quickly retreated to change back into her work clothes while Nathaniel answered it, finding Mrs. Pemberton with an armful of mending. "Good morning," Nathaniel said with a smile that felt permanently fixed to his face now. "How can I help you today?" The autumn weeks passed in a haze of work and stolen moments of affection. Nathaniel and Greshka were careful to maintain propriety when customers were present, but in private, they explored their growing relationship with the tentative excitement of first love. Small touches as they worked side by side, kisses stolen during lunch breaks, evenings spent talking until late into the night, learning everything about each other. Nathaniel taught Greshka to read, discovering she had never had the opportunity to learn. She proved as dedicated a student with letters as she had been with stitching, practicing her writing in the margins of his ledgers during slow periods. In return, she taught him basic self-defense, insisting that even if he could not fight like a warrior, he should know how to protect himself. "You are strong in ways that have nothing to do with muscles," she told him during one lesson, gently correcting his stance. "But knowing how to fall properly and where to strike an opponent could save your life someday." "I have made it 28 years without needing to strike anyone," Nathaniel pointed out, though he tried to remember her instructions. "And I hope you make it to 88 without needing to," Greshka replied. But hope is not protection. Their relationship was not without challenges. Nathaniel's illness worsened as the weather grew colder, leaving him bedridden for 3 days straight with a fever that terrified Greshka. She nursed him through it with the same dedication he had shown her when she was injured, but the experience left them both shaken. "You could have died," Greshka said hoarsely once he was recovered enough to sit up. "I sat here watching you struggle to breathe and felt so helpless." "Welcome to how I feel every time you climb on the roof to fix a shingle or move heavy fabric bolts against my advice," Nathaniel replied, catching her hand. We each have our vulnerabilities. That does not make us any less worthy of love. Greshka pressed his hand to her cheek, her eyes closing. I am not used to being afraid of loss. Warriors accept death as part of life, but the thought of losing you. She opened her eyes to look at him directly. It makes me understand why people avoid caring too deeply. This kind of love leaves you vulnerable in ways a blade never could. Would you prefer not to love me then? Nathaniel asked softly. To go back to before when we were just employer and employee? Never, Greshka said fiercely. I would rather have the fear and vulnerability and all of it than go back to being alone. You are worth every moment of terror. The first snow came in late October, blanketing the town in white and bringing business nearly to a halt. Nathaniel used the quiet time to teach Greshka more advanced techniques, showing her how to construct a garment from start to finish. Her first attempt at making a shirt was lopsided and had the sleeves attached backward, but her second was good enough that Nathaniel wore it proudly. You are a natural, he told her, examining her increasingly even stitches. Another year and you could open your own shop if you wanted. Why would I do that when I have this one? Greshka asked, genuinely confused. Then understanding dawned. Unless you are trying to tell me you want me to leave. No, Nathaniel said quickly. Never. I just meant you have options now, skills that could take you anywhere. You are not trapped here by circumstance anymore. Greshka set down her sewing and took both his hands in hers. I am not here because I have nowhere else to go, Nathaniel. I am here because I choose to be, because this shop feels like home, because you are here. I want you to stay, Nathaniel admitted, for as long as you want to be here. Forever if. He trailed off, suddenly uncertain. Forever sounds perfect to me, Greshka said, and kissed him to seal the promise. They began making long-term plans after that conversation. Nathaniel taught Greshka the business side of tailoring, how to calculate costs, manage inventory, and handle difficult customers. Greshka took on more of the physical demands of running the shop, allowing Nathaniel to conserve his limited strength for the detailed work only he could do. They became a true partnership, each compensating for the other's weaknesses. Word of their relationship spread gradually through the town. Some people were appalled, muttering about unnatural unions and the end of proper society. But others, particularly the younger folk, were intrigued by the idea of human-orc cooperation. Mayor Thompson remained supportive, which meant the town guard did not harass them. Slowly, grudgingly, they gained a measure of acceptance. Not everyone was pleased by this development. In late November, a group of 5 men from the neighboring town of Ashford came looking for trouble. They burst into the shop one afternoon when Nathaniel was alone, Greshka having gone to the market for supplies. We heard you were harboring an orc here, the largest one said, his breath reeking of ale. That true? Nathaniel straightened from his workbench, trying to hide his nervousness. I employ an assistant who happens to be an orc, yes. Is there something I can help you gentlemen with? You can help us by telling us where the green skin is, another man sneered. We do not tolerate orc lovers in these parts. Then it is fortunate we are not in your parts, Nathaniel replied with more courage than he felt. This is Millbrook, and Mayor Thompson has no issue with my employee. The men advanced, and Nathaniel recognized the danger too late. His hand moved toward the shears on his workbench, remembering Greshka's self-defense lessons, but he was too slow and too weak. The largest man grabbed him by the front of his shirt, lifting him nearly off his feet. Maybe we should teach you a lesson about keeping to your own kind, the man growled. The door crashed open before he could follow through on the threat. Greshka stood in the doorway, her arms full of market purchases that dropped to the floor as she took in the scene. Her face transformed into something fierce and terrible, the warrior she had been, awakened to protect what was hers. "Put him down." Her voice was low and deadly, carrying the weight of suppressed violence. The men turned to face her, and their drunken confidence wavered. Greshka stood nearly as tall as the largest of them, and the cold fury in her eyes promised severe consequences for anyone foolish enough to continue threatening Nathaniel. "We were just having a conversation," the man said, though he lowered Nathaniel back to his feet. "You were assaulting my employer and my—" Greshka paused, then said the word with deliberate pride, "my beloved, in his own shop. That was your first and last mistake. Your beloved." One of the other men laughed nervously. "That is disgusting." "Humans and orcs should not—" He did not get to finish. Greshka moved with speed that shocked everyone, covering the distance in 2 strides and lifting the speaker by his collar. "My beloved," she repeated, her voice deadly calm. "The kindest, bravest, most honorable person I have ever met. And you will treat him with respect, or you will answer to me." The men scrambled for the door, their earlier aggression evaporating in the face of an angry orc warrior. Greshka released the one she held, letting him stumble after his companions. She stood in the doorway until they were out of sight, her whole body vibrating with suppressed violence. Then she turned to Nathaniel, and her expression crumbled. "Did they hurt you?" "Are you—" "I am fine," Nathaniel assured her, though his legs felt shaky. "Thanks to you." Greshka crossed to him in 3 strides and pulled him into her arms, holding him with desperate tightness. "When I saw him grab you, her voice broke. "I could have killed them. I wanted to. It took everything I had to just frighten them away instead." "But you did not kill them," Nathaniel pointed out, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You protected me without losing yourself to violence. That took more strength than any battle." They stood like that for long minutes, both trembling with reaction. When they finally pulled apart, Nathaniel cupped Greshka's face in his hands. "You called me your beloved, in front of witnesses." "I did," Greshka confirmed, no hint of regret in her voice. "I am done hiding what you mean to me. If the world has a problem with us, then the world can adjust. I will not pretend my heart is anything other than yours." "I love you," Nathaniel said simply, "and I am honored to be your beloved." "I love you too," Greshka replied, "now and always." The incident with the men from Ashford had an unexpected consequence. Word of how Greshka had defended Nathaniel spread through Millbrook, and people's attitudes began to shift. She was no longer just the orc Tailor's assistant, but the one who protected Nathaniel from those Ashford troublemakers. Respect, begrudging though it might be, began to replace mere tolerance. Mayor Thompson visited the shop a few days after the incident to check on them. "I heard what happened. Are you both all right?" "We are fine," Nathaniel assured him. "Thank you for asking." Thompson nodded, then looked at Greshka directly. "I also heard that you could have seriously hurt those men but chose not to. That shows restraint and judgment. The town council has been discussing the possibility of hiring you as a deputy watchman. Someone with your skills could be valuable in keeping the peace." Greshka looked stunned. "You want to hire me? As a guard?" "If you are interested," Thompson replied. "It would be part-time, mostly evening patrols. Leave your days free for the Tailor shop. And it would come with official recognition of your residency status here in Millbrook." "Official recognition means she could not be expelled without cause," Nathaniel said, understanding dawning. "She would have legal standing." "Exactly," Thompson confirmed. "I cannot make people like you, Greshka. But I can ensure you have the same protections under the law as any other resident. And frankly, having an orc on the town guard might prevent future incidents like the one with the Ashford men. It sends a message that Millbrook does not tolerate prejudice-motivated violence." Greshka looked at Nathaniel, seeking his opinion. He squeezed her hand. "It is your choice, but I think it is a wonderful opportunity." "I accept," Greshka said, turning back to Thompson. "And thank you for everything." "Thank me by keeping our town safe," Thompson replied with a slight smile. "I expect you will be quite good at it." After the mayor left, Greshka and Nathaniel celebrated with a simple dinner and the last of his uncle's wine. They talked late into the night about what this change meant, how it would affect their lives and their future together. "I never imagined I could have this," Greshka said softly as they lay together on the cot in the back room, propriety abandoned in favor of closeness. Nathaniel's head rested on her shoulder while her arm wrapped protectively around him. "A home, meaningful work, legal status, and someone who loves me despite everything I am." "Not despite what you are," Nathaniel corrected gently. "I love you, Greshka, for everything you are. Your strength and your gentleness, your fierce loyalty and your kind heart, the way you look when you are concentrating on a difficult stitch, the sound of your laugh, all of it." "You are going to make me cry," Greshka warned, her voice thick with emotion. "You have seen me at my absolute worst, sick and weak and barely able to breathe," Nathaniel pointed out. "I think I can handle seeing you cry." The tears came then, rolling down her green cheeks in the lamplight. But they were happy tears, the release of months of tension and fear and hoping for something she had not dared to believe possible. Nathaniel held her as best he could, his smaller frame pressed against her larger one, and let her cry herself out. "I want to marry you," Greshka said suddenly, once her tears had subsided. "I know it is probably not legal, and half the town would lose their minds, but I want it anyway. I want everyone to know that you are mine and I am yours." Nathaniel's heart felt too large for his chest. There are priests who perform hand-fasting ceremonies. They are not recognized by the law, but they are recognized by the gods and by those who witness them. We could do that, make our commitment to each other official in the ways that matter most. "Yes," Greshka breathed. "When?" "Spring," Nathaniel decided. "When the world is waking up and everything feels possible, we will have been together nearly a year by then. That feels right." "Spring," Greshka agreed and kissed him with all the love and promise in her heart. Winter settled in with its characteristic harshness, but inside the Tailor shop there was warmth and happiness. Greshka took to her new role as deputy watchman with the same dedication she brought to everything, and Millbrook enjoyed the most peaceful winter in years. Troublemakers took one look at the orc warrior patrolling the streets and decided to make trouble elsewhere. During the days, she continued working with Nathaniel, her skills improving until she could handle almost any task he set her. They took on a particularly ambitious project in January, creating a complete wardrobe for a wealthy merchant's daughter who was getting married in the spring. The work was demanding and detailed, requiring both their skills. "This is beautiful," Greshka said one evening, holding up the wedding dress they were working on together. "Do you think ours will be this elaborate?" "Ours?" Nathaniel looked up from the hem he was stitching. Greshka blushed. "I mean, if we are having a hand-fasting ceremony, I assumed there would be. We would wear, I mean." She trailed off, flustered. Nathaniel set down his work and came to stand beside her. "I think," he said carefully, "that you should wear the most beautiful dress I can make for you. And I will wear my finest suit, and we will stand before our friends and the gods and pledge ourselves to each other for all time." "Our friends," Greshka repeated softly. "I like the sound of that. I have not had friends since I was exiled." It was true that they had built a small circle of support. Mayor Thompson and his wife had become genuine allies. Mrs. Pemberton, once skeptical, had warmed to Greshka after the orc had saved her grandson from a runaway cart with quick reflexes. Even old Gerald from the smithy had grudgingly admitted that Greshka was not so bad for an orc. They began planning their hand-fasting ceremony in earnest, keeping it secret from most of the town but sharing their intentions with their small circle of friends. Mrs. Pemberton offered to make the flower arrangements. Gerald's son, who played fiddle, agreed to provide music. And Mayor Thompson, moved by their love story, offered to officiate the ceremony himself. "It may not be legal in the eyes of the kingdom," Thompson told them, "but as mayor of this town, I can declare you married in Millbrook's records. That should provide some protections if anyone tries to challenge your right to live together." Nathaniel started work on Greshka's dress in February, pouring all his skill and love into every stitch. He chose a deep emerald silk that made her skin glow, cutting the bodice to flatter her strong shoulders and the skirt to flow like water when she moved. He embroidered the hem with symbols representing both their cultures, human flowers intertwined with orc clan marks, creating something entirely new and beautiful. Greshka, in turn, crafted a vest for Nathaniel in supple leather dyed deep blue, decorating it with silver buttons she commissioned from Gerald's smithy. She stitched protective runes along the seams, old orc magic meant to guard against illness and harm. It was a gift of love and worry, her attempt to shield him from the fragility of his own body. March brought the first hints of spring snow melting into mud, buds appearing on trees, and longer daylight hours. Nathaniel's health improved with the warmer weather, and he felt stronger than he had in months. They set the date for their hand-fasting for the first day of April, exactly 1 year after Greshka had crashed through his window. The night before the ceremony, they sat together in the shop that had become their home, both too excited and nervous to sleep. "Are you nervous?" Greshka asked, tracing patterns on Nathaniel's palm. "Terrified," he admitted. "Not about marrying you, that is the one thing I am absolutely certain about, but about the future, about whether I will be a good husband to you, about my health and how long I can." He stopped, unable to voice his deepest fear. "Do not," Greshka said fiercely, squeezing his hand. "Do not borrow sorrow from tomorrow. Whatever time we have together, whether it is 50 years or 5, it will be enough because we will have loved fully. That is all anyone can ask for." "When did you become so wise?" Nathaniel asked with a wobbly smile. "When I fell in love with a fragile tailor who taught me that strength comes in many forms," Greshka replied. "You have changed me, Nathaniel, made me better, happier, more whole than I have ever been." "You have done the same for me," Nathaniel said. "Before you crashed through that window, I was just existing, going through the motions of life without really living. You gave me purpose and joy and a reason to believe in tomorrow." They kissed then, slow and sweet and full of promise. Tomorrow they would stand before their friends and pledge forever. But tonight, they simply held each other and marveled at how 2 broken people had somehow made each other whole. The morning of the hand-fasting dawned clear and bright, spring sunlight streaming through the windows of the Tailor shop. Nathaniel woke early, too excited to sleep, and spent an hour pressing his suit and making sure every detail was perfect. His hands shook slightly as he dressed, nerves and excitement warring in his chest. In the back room, Greshka was going through similar preparations. Mrs. Pemberton had come to help her with her hair, weaving spring flowers through the dark strands in a style that was part human tradition, part orc. When Greshka finally emerged in her wedding dress, Nathaniel felt his breath stop completely. The emerald silk draped her form perfectly, highlighting her strength while showcasing her femininity. The embroidery along the hem caught the light, making it seem as though her dress was edged in fire. Her small tusks were polished to a gleam, and her amber eyes shone with happy tears. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," Nathaniel said hoarsely. "And you look like a prince," Greshka replied, taking in his blue vest and carefully pressed trousers. "I cannot believe I get to marry you." They had decided to hold the ceremony in the shop itself, the place where their story had begun. A small group had gathered Mayor Thompson and his wife, Mrs. Pemberton and her family, Gerald and his son, and a handful of other townspeople who had come to support them. It was not a large crowd, but it was enough. These were people who had chosen to look past prejudice and see only love. Mayor Thompson stood before them, a simple cloth of blue and green draped over his shoulders to mark his role as officiant. "We are gathered here today," he began, his voice carrying through the small space, "to witness the joining of two souls who have found in each other something rare and precious. Nathaniel York and Greshka Ironhide come from different peoples, different traditions. But love recognizes no borders and respects no prejudice." He turned to Nathaniel. "Nathaniel, do you take Greshka as your wife? Do you promise to love her in times of plenty and times of want, in sickness and in health, for all the days of your life?" "I do," Nathaniel said clearly, his voice not wavering despite his pounding heart. "I love her more than I have words to express. She is my home, my heart, my reason for everything." Thompson turned to Greshka. "Greshka, do you take Nathaniel as your husband? Do you promise to love him in times of peace and times of struggle, to honor his gentle strength and guard his fragile health, for all the days of your life?" "I do," Greshka said, tears streaming down her face now. "He saved me when I had nothing and no one. He taught me that love is not weakness but the greatest strength of all. I will love him until my last breath and beyond." Then by the authority granted to me as mayor of Millbrook, and in the sight of these witnesses and the gods who watch over us all, I declare you married, Thompson said with genuine warmth. "May your love be a light in the darkness and a shelter in the storm. Nathaniel, you may kiss your wife." Nathaniel reached up, cupping Greshka's face in his hands, and drew her down into a kiss that was witnessed by their small but sincere gathering of friends. Applause broke out, mixed with a few happy sobs from Mrs. Pemberton. When they finally broke apart, both were crying and smiling so hard their faces hurt. "My wife," Nathaniel said wonderingly. "My husband," Greshka replied, the word tasting like honey on her tongue. The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. Gerald's son played his fiddle while people danced in the cramped shop. Mrs. Pemberton had made a cake with buttercream frosting. Someone produced wine, and toasts were offered to the happy couple's health and future. "To Nathaniel and Greshka," Mayor Thompson proclaimed, raising his glass. "May they show us all that love is stronger than fear, and that connection bridges any divide." "To Nathaniel and Greshka," the small crowd echoed, drinking deeply. As the evening wore on and the guests began to drift home, Nathaniel and Greshka found themselves alone in their shop once more. The decorations still hung from the rafters, and flower petals littered the floor, but they paid it no mind. They simply stood holding each other, marveling at the fact that they were now husband and wife. "I cannot believe we did it," Greshka said softly. "We actually got married." "I can," Nathaniel replied. "Because when I look at you, I see my future, and that future was always going to lead to this moment." They made their way to the back room together, still dressed in their wedding finery, and spent their first night as husband and wife wrapped in each other's arms. They talked and laughed and made plans for the life they would build together. The future stretched before them, uncertain but full of promise. The weeks following their handfasting brought both challenges and triumphs. Some townspeople disapproved of their union and made their feelings known through cold shoulders and whispered comments. But for every person who turned away, Another stepped forward with congratulations and support. The balance was slowly tipping in favor of acceptance. Business at the tailor shop actually improved after the wedding. People were curious about the unusual couple, and curiosity led to commissions. Greshka's skill had grown to the point where she could handle most alterations independently, and customers began requesting her by name. She had a particular talent for working with leather and heavy fabrics, creating practical garments that still showed artistic flair. I never thought I would find satisfaction in creating things rather than destroying them, she told Nathaniel one evening as they closed up the shop together. But I love this work. I love seeing someone's face light up when they put on a garment that fits them perfectly and makes them feel beautiful. You have found your calling, Nathaniel said, pride evident in his voice. You are a gifted tailor, Greshka. And I am not just saying that because you are my wife. Your wife, Greshka repeated, still delighting in the word. I do not think I will ever get tired of hearing that. Their domestic life settled into comfortable routines. Greshka continued her part-time work with the town guard, building a reputation as fair but firm. Troublemakers learned quickly that she would not tolerate violence or theft, and her presence alone was often enough to discourage bad behavior. During the days, she worked beside Nathaniel in the shop, their partnership seamless after so many months together. Nathaniel's health remained fragile, with occasional setbacks that frightened them both. But Greshka was always there to nurse him through the difficult periods, and he always recovered with her steady care. They learned to accept his limitations as part of their life together, rather than fighting against them constantly. One warm evening in late May, they took a rare evening off to walk through the hills outside town. The spring flowers were in full bloom, painting the meadows in riots of color. They found a quiet spot overlooking the valley and sat together, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. You ever regret it? Nathaniel asked quietly. Choosing this life with me instead of returning to your people, finding a clan that would accept you. Greshka turned to look at him, her expression fierce and tender all at once. Never. Not for a single moment. You are my clan now, Nathaniel. You and the life we have built together. That is worth more than any acceptance from people who would have cast me out for showing basic decency. I worry sometimes, Nathaniel admitted, that I am not enough for you, that you need more than what I can give. You are everything, Greshka said firmly, taking his hand. You are home and safety and love. You are the reason I wake up happy and go to sleep content. Do I sometimes miss the simplicity of warrior life? Perhaps, but I would never trade what we have for that old existence. This is real, Nathaniel. What we have built together is real and valuable and more precious than anything else in the world. Nathaniel leaned his head against her shoulder, feeling the tension he had been carrying ease away. I love you. And I love you, Greshka replied, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. Forever and always, my fragile, beautiful husband. They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys. But for now, there was only this. Two souls who had found each other against all odds, building a life full of love and purpose. As summer arrived, bringing long days of work and warm evenings spent together, Nathaniel and Greshka continued to thrive. The tailor shop prospered, earning a reputation for quality work and fair prices. Greshka's position with the town guard became permanent, with a real salary that allowed them to save money for the first time. They began talking seriously about expanding the shop, perhaps taking on an apprentice of their own someday. The idea of passing on their knowledge to a new generation, of creating something that would outlast them both, appealed strongly to Nathaniel's sense of legacy. "I want people to remember that this place was built by a human and an orc working together," he told Greshka as they discussed their plans one evening. "That we proved love and partnership can bridge any divide." "They will remember," Greshka assured him. "We are writing a new story, you and I. One that will inspire others who come after us." In late July, they received unexpected news. A traveling merchant brought word that several other mixed-species couples had formed in nearby towns, inspired by the story of the Millbrook tailor and his orc wife. Humans and orcs, yes, but also humans and elves, dwarves and halflings, people who had looked at Nathaniel and Greshka's example and decided that love was worth the risk of social disapproval. "We started something," Nathaniel said wonderingly, reading the merchant's letter. "Our story is spreading." "Good," Greshka said fiercely. "Let it spread. Let everyone know that prejudice does not have to win, that choosing love over fear is always the right answer." They celebrated their first anniversary on the first day of August, marking not the hand-fasting ceremony but the night Greshka had crashed through Nathaniel's window. It seemed more fitting to honor the moment when their lives had collided and changed forever. "1 year ago, I was desperate and alone," Greshka said as they shared a private dinner in their shop, now permanently closed for the evening. "I had nothing but wounds and fear, and you looked at me and saw someone worth saving." "1 year ago, I was lonely and resigned to a life of solitude," Nathaniel replied. "I had accepted that I would always be strange and separate. And then you came crashing into my life literally and taught me what it means to truly connect with someone." They raised their glasses in a toast to the journey they had taken and the future still ahead of them. Later, as they lay together in the darkness, Greshka voiced something that had been on her mind for weeks. "I want to have a child with you," she said quietly. "I know it is complicated, and I do not even know if it is possible between our species, but I want to try. I want to create a life with you, Nathaniel. A family." Nathaniel was silent for a long moment, processing this declaration. "I want that too," he finally said. "Though I worry about my health, about whether I will be strong enough to be a proper father." "You will be exactly the father any child would be lucky to have," Greshka said firmly. "Kind and patient and wise, and I will be there to handle the parts that require physical strength. We will be partners in this as we are in everything else." "Then yes," Nathaniel said, pulling her closer. "Let us try to build a family together. Whatever form it takes, it will be ours." They began trying for a child with hope and determination, though they knew the odds were uncertain. Humans and orcs could potentially produce offspring, but it was rare and came with its own challenges. Still, they persevered, treating each month as a new possibility rather than focusing on disappointments. Autumn arrived again, bringing the familiar rhythms of harvest season and cooler weather. Nathaniel's health held steady, neither improving nor worsening significantly. The shop continued to prosper, and Greshka's reputation as a fair and capable guard grew stronger. Life had found a comfortable pattern. Then, on a crisp October morning, Greshka woke feeling different. She could not quite name what had changed, but something in her body felt new and strange. When the feeling persisted for several days, accompanied by unusual fatigue and a sensitivity to smells, she began to suspect. Mrs. Pemberton confirmed it 2 weeks later, examining Greshka with the practiced eye of a woman who had birthed 6 children and helped deliver dozens more. "You are pregnant, dear. Maybe 6 weeks along, I would guess." Greshka stood frozen, unable to process the information. "Pregnant. Expecting a baby," Mrs. Pemberton confirmed with a warm smile. "Congratulations. You and Nathaniel must be thrilled. Greshka rushed back to the shop, bursting through the door with such energy that Nathaniel dropped the shirt he was hemming. "I am pregnant," she announced, then burst into tears of joy and terror and overwhelming emotion. Nathaniel crossed to her in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms despite their height difference. "Truly, you are certain?" Mrs. Pemberton confirmed it. Greshka sobbed into his shoulder. "We are going to have a baby, Nathaniel. We are going to be parents." "We are going to be parents," Nathaniel repeated, wonder filling his voice. Then he was crying too, both of them standing in the middle of the shop holding each other and weeping with happiness. The pregnancy was not easy. Greshka's orc constitution meant she could handle physical demands that would have incapacitated a human woman, but it also meant the pregnancy progressed faster. Where a human pregnancy took 9 months, half-orc pregnancies typically lasted only 7. And no one quite knew what to expect from a human orc child born to a human father and orc mother. Nathaniel worried constantly, fussing over Greshka's comfort and health to the point where she had to firmly tell him to stop treating her like she was made of glass. "I am pregnant, not dying," she reminded him. "I can still work and walk and live my life." "I know," Nathaniel said, suitably chastened. "I just want to make sure you and the baby are safe." "We are safe," Greshka assured him, taking his hand and placing it on her stomach where the smallest swell was beginning to show. "Feel that. Our child is growing strong. They will be fine, and so will I." As Greshka's pregnancy progressed, the town's reaction was mixed. Some people were horrified by the idea of a half-orc child being born in Millbrook. Others were cautiously supportive, viewing it as another step toward acceptance between the species. Mayor Thompson made it clear that the child would be welcomed as any other resident of the town, which went a long way toward quieting the most vocal critics. Nathaniel threw himself into preparing for fatherhood with characteristic thoroughness. He read every book on child rearing he could find, modified their living space to accommodate a baby, and began sewing tiny clothes in soft fabrics. Watching him carefully stitch a miniature shirt, his face scrunched in concentration, Greshka felt her heart overflow with love for this gentle man who would be father to her child. "You are going to be an amazing father," she told him one evening as he showed her the latest addition to their growing collection of baby clothes. "I hope so," Nathaniel said quietly. "I never knew my father well. He was always off at war. And I do not remember much of my mother from when I was very small. I worry that I do not have the right examples to follow." "Then we will figure it out together," Greshka said firmly. "We will make mistakes, but we will make them with love, and that is what matters most." Winter arrived, bringing concerns about Greshka giving birth in the coldest months. But she remained healthy and strong. Her body adapted to the demands of pregnancy in ways that amazed Mrs. Pemberton. "Orc women are built to weather hardship," the older woman observed during one of her regular check-ins. "Your child is lucky to have your constitution." The baby arrived on a snowy evening in late December, 3 weeks earlier than Mrs. Pemberton had predicted, but right on schedule for a half-orc pregnancy. Greshka's labor was intense, but mercifully brief, lasting only 4 hours from first contraction to final push. Nathaniel stayed by her side throughout, holding her hand and whispering encouragement even as she nearly crushed his fingers during the worst of the contractions. When the baby finally emerged, wailing with impressive lung capacity, Mrs. Pemberton cleaned them quickly and handed the bundle to Greshka with tears in her eyes. "A girl," she announced. "A beautiful, healthy girl." Greshka cradled her daughter against her chest, staring in wonder at the tiny face. The baby had her green skin, though a few shades lighter than Greshka's own. Small tusks were barely visible in her mouth, and her ears came to delicate points. But her eyes, when they opened to regard her parents, were a warm brown that came straight from Nathaniel. "She is perfect," Nathaniel breathed, reaching out to touch one impossibly small hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his thumb with surprising strength. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name her?" Greshka asked, unable to look away from her daughter's face. They had discussed names extensively over the past months, debating between human and orc traditions. In the end, they chose something that honored both their heritages. "Nessa," Nathaniel said softly. "It means miracle in the old tongue my mother spoke, and York for my family name. Nessa York." "Nessa," Greshka repeated, testing the name. The baby made a small sound, almost like agreement. "Hello, Nessa. I am your mother and this is your father. We have been waiting so long to meet you." The first weeks of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Nessa proved to be a relatively easy baby, sleeping for decent stretches, and only fussing when she was hungry or needed changing. Greshka's body recovered quickly from the birth, her orc constitution serving her well. Nathaniel threw himself into caring for their daughter with the same attention to detail he brought to his tailoring, learning her cries and preferences with dedicated focus. They took turns with night feedings, both unwilling to let the other shoulder too much of the burden. During the days, they rigged up a basket near Nathaniel's workbench where Nessa could sleep while her parents worked. Customers cooed over the baby, and even some of the previously skeptical townspeople softened when confronted with an innocent child. "She is just precious, Mrs. Pemberton declared during one visit, bouncing Nessa gently in her arms. "And look at those eyes. She is going to be a heartbreaker someday." Watching Nathaniel with their daughter was Greshka's favorite sight in the world. Despite his fragility, he handled Nessa with perfect confidence, changing her tiny clothes and singing to her in his soft voice. She seemed to know he was special, always calming at his touch and watching him with fascinated attention. "She loves you," Greshka observed one evening as Nathaniel rocked Nessa to sleep. "You can see it in the way she looks at you." "I love her more than I thought it was possible to love anything," Nathaniel replied quietly, pressing a kiss to Nessa's forehead. "She is our miracle, Greshka." Proof that love can create something beautiful despite all the odds against it. Spring came again, bringing Nessa's first season of warmth and growth. At 4 months old, she was already showing signs of her mixed heritage stronger than a human baby her age but with Nathaniel's gentle temperament. She smiled early and often, her little tusked grin bringing joy to everyone who saw it. Mayor Thompson visited one afternoon to check on the family and bring news. "I thought you should know," he said, watching Nessa clutch at Greshka's finger with determined grip, "that the regional governor has heard about Millbrook's success with interspecies integration. He is considering proposing new laws to protect mixed couples and their children across the kingdom." "Laws?" Nathaniel looked up from the tiny dress he was hemming for Nessa. "What kind of laws?" "Legal recognition of marriages like yours," Thompson explained. "Protection against discrimination. Citizenship rights for mixed-species children. It is all preliminary, but your family, you three specifically, have become something of a symbol, proof that it can work." Greshka felt tears prick her eyes. "Other families will not have to fear like we did. Other children like Nessa will have legal standing from birth." "That is the hope," Thompson confirmed. "Change is slow, but it is happening. And you two started it just by choosing to love each other and refusing to hide that love away." After the mayor left, Nathaniel and Greshka looked at each other over Nessa's sleeping form, understanding passing between them without words. They had not set out to change the world. They had simply tried to survive, to build a life together despite everything working against them. but in doing so, they had become something larger than themselves, a symbol of hope for others who dared to love across traditional boundaries. "We did something important," Greshka said softly, "without even meaning to." "We loved each other," Nathaniel replied. "That is all." But sometimes love is the most revolutionary act of all. Nessa grew and thrived, surrounded by the warmth of her parents' devotion and the gradual acceptance of their community. By her first birthday, she was walking on wobbly legs and babbling in a mixture of human words and orc sounds that delighted both her parents. The shop prospered, with Greshka now a full partner in the business rather than just an assistant. They hired their first apprentice that summer, a shy human girl named Rose who had been orphaned and needed a trade. Greshka taught her with the same patience Nathaniel had once shown her, passing on the skills and knowledge they had built together. The cycle continued, love and learning flowing forward to the next generation. On quiet evenings when the shop was closed and Nessa was asleep in her small bed, Nathaniel and Greshka would sit together in the space where their story had begun. Sometimes they talked about the future, making plans and dreaming dreams. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, grateful for the life they had built together. "I never thanked you properly," Greshka said one such evening, her head resting on Nathaniel's shoulder. "For seeing past what I was and recognizing who I could be." "You did not need to become anything different," Nathaniel replied, playing with her fingers. "I just helped you become more fully yourself, and you did the same for me. You taught me that fragility is not the same as weakness, and that gentleness can be its own kind of strength." "We saved each other," Greshka said simply. "We did," Nathaniel agreed. "And then we built something beautiful together." The years ahead would bring their own challenges and joys. Nathaniel's health would remain fragile, requiring careful management. Nessa would grow into a spirited child who inherited her mother's courage and her father's compassion. More mixed-species families would come to Millbrook, drawn by its reputation for tolerance and finding the same acceptance that Nathaniel and Greshka had fought to create. But on that evening, none of that mattered. There was only this: a fragile tailor and an exiled orc warrior, now husband and wife, parents and partners, sitting together in their small shop and marveling at the miracle of the life they shared. Outside, the world continued its slow stumble toward acceptance and understanding. Inside, there was already everything they needed: love, family, and the knowledge that they had found in each other a home that could never be taken away. The story that had begun with a desperate woman crashing through a window had become something so much larger and more beautiful than either could have imagined. It was a testament to the power of choosing compassion over fear, love over prejudice, hope over despair. And it would echo forward through generations, inspiring others to take the same leap of faith that Nathaniel and Greshka had taken on that cold night, when a fragile tailor looked at a wounded orc and saw not an enemy, but a person worth saving. Their happily ever after was not perfect or easy, but it was real and earned and wholly theirs. And in the end, that was all that mattered. They had found each other in the darkness, built something bright together, and created a legacy that would outlast them both. It was more than either had dared to hope for, and exactly what they both deserved. As the lamplight flickered and the evening deepened to night, Nathaniel pressed a kiss to Greshka's forehead and murmured the words that had become their private ritual. "Thank you for breaking into my shop." Greshka smiled, that same soft expression that had captivated him from the beginning. "Thank you for ordering me to strip instead of running away screaming." They laughed together, remembering that first desperate night and all the love that had grown from it. And in the cradle nearby, baby Nessa slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that she was cherished and safe. The future stretched before them, unknown but full of promise, and they would face it together as they had faced everything else with love, courage, and absolute faith in each other. The tailor shop of Nathaniel York and Greshka Ironhide would stand for many years to come, a beacon of hope in a changing world. And the story of how they found each other would be told and retold, inspiring countless others to choose love over fear. But the truest and most beautiful version of their story existed only in their hearts, in the countless small moments of tenderness and laughter and connection that made up their shared life. They had started as broken pieces, alone and struggling. Together, they had become something whole and strong and beautiful. And they would spend the rest of their days grateful for the random chance and desperate circumstances that had brought them together, transforming two separate lives into one shared journey. In the end, that is what love does. It takes the fragmented and makes it whole. It sees past surface differences to the soul beneath. It dares to hope when hope seems foolish, and it perseveres when perseverance seems impossible. Nathaniel and Greshka had learned these truths the hard way, through pain and fear and the courage to choose each other despite every obstacle. And now, in their warm shop with their sleeping daughter and their hard-won happiness, they lived those truths every single day. Their love story had no grand dramatic gestures or epic battles. It was built instead from quiet moments, patient understanding, and the revolutionary choice to see each other fully and love what they saw. That night, like every night, they retired to their small bedroom hand in hand. And like every night, they fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, two hearts beating in synchrony, two souls that had found their other half against all odds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys. But tonight there was only this: love, family, home, and the deep peace of knowing they had found exactly where they belonged. The story of the orc girl who broke into the tailor's shop, and the fragile man who ordered her to strip, and then offered her everything, had reached its perfect conclusion. Not with a dramatic ending, but with the quiet, profound happiness of two people who had chosen each other and built a life worth living. And they lived that life, happily ever after, in all the ways that truly mattered.